Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with the Eyeshadow Palette Tag and this tag was created by Samantha March and Allie Glines, I think it is, and I will leave both of their channels down below, and I feel like a lot of people have done this video as well, so if you want to find more people who have done this tag, you search for it on the YouTube search bar above and you will find tons and tons of videos with this tag, because I really enjoyed watching lots of people doing this, but I just thought that I would do my version today and go through my eyeshadows. So the tag has 13 questions, I think, if I counted correctly, and I have them all on my phone. So I'm just going to go through them in the order of the video. And the first question is, show your newest palette. So this one is a bit tricky for me because I actually bought a lot of palettes at the same time last time I picked up a palette, and it's these 5 eyeshadows palettes from Colourpop. So I'd made an order with Colourpop, I think it was back in February, when they did a 30% off sale. So I got all of these done, and I just picked up a few that I really been wanting for a long time. So these are the 5 that I picked up, and the palettes that I have is the Going Coconuts palette. This is just a really beautiful neutral palette. It looks like this, and I like this because I just kind of enjoy these tones, and I don't really have anything else like this in my collection because it's more kind of camely, like the cool tone, but they're not grey, which I really enjoy. So this is the first palette. Then the second palette is the Lilac You a Lot. I already had the It's My Pleasure palette, so this one was just kind of to add onto that, and I really enjoy this palette as well. This is what it looks like. I've created a few looks with this, but I'm really excited to play around with this more now in spring, but it's just a stunning palette. Then we have the Honey palette. This is one that I wanted for a really long time. I really enjoy this palette. I actually haven't played around with it that much yet. I used to swatch it and I still have the plastic kind of film on, as you can see. So this is one that I definitely have to play around with more, but I think I will play with this more in summer or even now in spring. But I'm excited to pull this in now in the next upcoming months. And also, I don't know if you can see, but I'm actually wearing Palooza, the glitter in the middle, on my lower lash line today. It's not the one from this palette because I actually have a glitter palette as well from Colourpop, and it's in there. So that's the only shade in this that I have a duplicate of, but I am wearing that today. Then the last 2 palettes are both the green palettes, and that is the Mint to Be palette as well as the Just My Luck palette. I am wearing the Just My Luck palette again on my eyes today. I have the middle shade Mary Jane on my inner corners. I really enjoy this. I'm actually panning this currently while I have it in one of my projects, where I'm trying to use this 10 times in a month. So one of those is obviously today, like I said, but I've been really enjoying this palette and I love green eyeshadows, which is why I wanted to include that. But yeah, this is a beautiful palette and I'm really happy to have it in my collection. And like I said, the last one is the Mint to Be. I just got this to kind of add on to the Just My Luck palette, but also just because I feel like it's a beautiful palette to have now in springtime. So that was quite an elaborate answer to the first question, but like I said, it was quite a few palettes that I picked up at the same time. So let's just move on to the second question, which is, what is your oldest eyeshadow palette? I feel like I will have kind of the same palette as a lot of people on this question, and that is my Urban Decay Naked palette. So this is the oldest eyeshadow palette that I have. I've had this since 2012. I picked this up in the States. I think I picked it up in New York the first time I went over there, and it just means a lot to me, and I can't really get rid of it. This is what it looks like. Obviously you already know that. I've gotten tons of use out of this one. When I first got it, I wasn't really that into eyeshadows. I wore a lot more lipstick back then, so surprisingly I don't have too much wear on it. I mean, I have 3 pans, but all of those are from my Pandos eyeshadows, so it's not really usage that I had back then when I used it every single day. But also back then I was really scared of hitting pan. I just didn't want to kind of do that because I was scared of kind of colors running out. But I have massive dips in some of the shades, like in Virgin. Naked is super close to hitting pan as well, and then obviously like Smog I've used a bit as well, and I think those are the main colors that I've used a lot, and perhaps Toasted as well. But this is a beautiful eyeshadow palette, and I can't really get rid of it. The mirror has cracked and gone, and yeah, it's just a really well loved palette, but for some reason I just can't get rid of it. So the third question is, what is your most expensive eyeshadow palette? And that is the palette that I picked up earlier this year, which is the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. So this is my first ever Natasha Denona eyeshadow palette, or even eyeshadow that I've tried, and I picked this up because I've been wanting to try a formula for the longest time, and I just fell in love with this palette when I saw it. So this is what it looks like. I think it's a stunning eyeshadow palette. It has a lot of kind of warm tones but also a lot of greens, and I have been really into greens recently, and I've been loving playing around with this palette. I feel like the greens that are in here are really nice kind of tones. They're a bit more grungy greens, which I like, or kind of mossy greens, things like that. And I think with all of the gold shades in this palette over here, it's really easy to create kind of slightly colorful but also wearable looks. So I enjoy this palette so much, and it's one of my most beloved palettes in my collection. I've been using this quite a lot this year actually, despite doing my Pan Art palette and my Pandos eyeshadows. This is a beautiful palette, and also since it has like smaller pans, I feel like it's better value than buying some of her other palettes, and you do get a lot of shades in this. So next up is my most affordable palette, and I actually have 3 palettes that are the same price, and I bought them together, and those are my Makeup Revolution kind of mini eyeshadow palettes. I had, like I said, bought 3 of them, but I'm just going to show this to kind of represent all of them, because one I'm actually going to show later, and the other one I have decluttered with. It's still here, but it's technically decluttered. But this one is the Rose Gold palette. It looks like this. I bought these I think a year and a half ago, and basically when I picked them up they were 3 for 2. So when I picked these up, I think they were £6 each. So I bought all 3 for £12, meaning they only cost me £4, which is super affordable. So those are definitely my most affordable palettes. The formula isn't great, which is why I decluttered one of them, and like I say, I'm panning the other one this year. The one I'm panning I actually quite enjoy. I am wearing a little bit of that on my eyes today as well. And yeah, it's a decent formula, but it's definitely not my favorite. But those are my most affordable palettes. So the next palette is Show Your Everyday palette, and this one was a bit tricky for me because I don't really have a palette that I reach for every single day, because I do quite a lot of eyeshadow projects, so that kind of determines what eyeshadows I reach for on an everyday basis. But I just thought of this question as if I had a palette that I wanted to reach for every day, or something that I reach for just for like a simple, I don't have to think about it look, or also if I had to recommend an everyday palette to someone else. And the palette that I chose is my Soft Glam palette from Anastasia. I just absolutely love this palette. When I first got it, I used it all the time. Or actually I didn't use it all the time. I used this for special occasions because I just cherished this so much when I picked it up. And I absolutely love a lot of these shades. And actually for some reason the eyeshadow that I'm most drawn into for this palette is Mulberry right here. I'm not really that into dark shades, but it's just something about the warmness of this that I absolutely love, and every time I use this palette I try to reach for the shade. But just a stunning palette, and I feel like this is a beautiful everyday palette because you have these kind of softer tones that you can use to create a really like light and easy look, but you also have a lot of darkness if you want to vamp it up, and the shimmer shades are amazing in this palette too. So this would be my everyday palette. Next up we have Show Your Most Colourful palette, and for this one it was quite difficult to me to decide on one palette, because obviously I have super colourful palettes like my monochromatic eyeshadow palettes from Colourpop, like the Just My Luck, the Like You A Lot, things like that, because they are basically just colours. But what I decided to go with this is my Magic Mini palette from Juvia's Place, because this one has a lot of different kind of colourful eyeshadows, and I do currently have one of these shades in our project pan, so this may be a spoiler for some people, so if you don't want to see that, skip maybe 5-10 seconds ahead. But this is what it looks like, and it has a lot of kind of different colorful looks. It has like some yellow, some blue, some green, some orange, some pink. So I feel like this is the one that I wanted to go with, because it's just kind of an overall colorful eyeshadow palette. So I really enjoy this. I hadn't played with this too much at the beginning of the year, but I got this drawn into my Pandos eyeshadows project twice, so I have been using it quite a lot due to that, and it is a beautiful eyeshadow palette. So moving on, the next prompt is show your smallest eyeshadow palette. And for a while I thought it would be my Heart Revolution palettes again, but I actually checked and I have one palette that is smaller, and that is my Urban Decay Naked Basic palette. So this is the original one. They've released a second version as well. This is what it looks like, and this is the smallest eyeshadow palette that I have. I actually quite enjoy this. It's a beautiful kind of palette to have if you just want to create like really basic matte looks. I don't reach for this that much anymore because I have so many other eyeshadows, and I do kind of reach for a bit more color nowadays compared to this. Another thing that I like about this is that it's quite cool toned compared to a lot of other eyeshadows, and I feel like especially when this came out there wasn't a lot of cool toned eyeshadow palettes on the market, so I really like that about it. But like I said, I don't reach for it too much now. This would potentially be something that I pan in the future. I just know that Urban Decay shades are so hard to pan because they're really deep, so that's the only thing that would scare me. But I am happy to have this in my collection still, but yeah, I don't really reach for it that much anymore. And then next is the opposite of that, which is show your biggest eyeshadow palette, and for that I have my Juvia's Place Masquerade Mini palette. Of course the Magic Mini is the same size, but I already showed that, so I just thought I would include this. So this is what this one looks like. Again, this is quite a colorful eyeshadow palette. The reason why I chose the Magic palette over this one is because this top half is quite neutral, although this bottom half is very colorful. But these are my largest eyeshadow palettes in my collection. I don't really have any super large eyeshadow palettes like the Morphe palettes or anything like that, and these are for me quite large, but I think if I had something larger I wouldn't really reach for them that often. So these are kind of the maximum that I would be willing to go, unless I find something that is kind of an exception. So next up we have show your eyeshadow palette with the best memory. And for this one it was quite difficult for me to choose a palette because I have a lot of memories with a lot of my eyeshadow palettes, but I didn't want to choose anything that I already picked for something else. But I could have picked the Naked palette, I could have picked the Natasha Denona palette, but what I ended up going with is my Modern Renaissance palette from Anastasia. This one, of course, everyone has already seen. It looks like this. I would say why this has the best memory for me is because I picked this up when I lived in Chicago. I lived there for 6 months doing my exchange during uni, and I picked this up then. That was an amazing time. I loved living there. I don't think I would ever settle down there, but I absolutely adore that city, and actually one of my closest friends now has moved there, so I can't wait to go and visit her and also see the States again and Chicago. But this palette just reminds me of that, and it just means a lot. And also to add on top of that, this palette was also something that I wanted for so long because it was super hyped on YouTube, and when I finally picked this up it was like the best feeling. The only other time I had that feeling buying an eyeshadow palette, I think, is like I said, the Naked palette, which just because that was the first high-end palette that I ever bought, and also that was very hyped and something that I really coveted for a really long time. And then also of course the Natasha Denona palette, although that specific palette I hadn't wanted for that long, but I just wanted to try Natasha Denona for like a super long time, so buying that meant a lot for me as well. So that is what I chose for this category. So next up we have the category show a palette that is worth the hype, and I decided to pick the Tribe palette from Juvia's. It's not like the most ever hyped, like obviously the Modern Renaissance, the Soft Glam, palettes like that has been more hyped on YouTube, but in the indie world, or when it comes to Juvia's Play palette, this is really hyped. At least that's what I've heard and what I saw, and I absolutely love this palette. The shades in this is stunning. I can't even describe how much I love this shade. I just need to swatch it. I haven't really swatched anything in this video, but this is just such a beautiful shade. You can see it has like a bronzy base, but it just has this green reflect, and it is absolutely stunning. It's like one of my favorite shades ever, and yeah, this is definitely worth the hype. I love it. The thing is, if you reach for this only, you would create quite green looks. Obviously you have this kind of brownish shade, but it has like some green undertones in it. Other than that, you have mostly green mattes, except this orange, but it is kind of hard to find neutral looks. But what I do a lot of the time is if I want something neutral and I just want like a pop of something, like for example this bronze with a slight green shift, or even this one has a green shift as well, I do reach for other palettes and then just reach for those two shimmers. And honestly, I would pick up this palette again just for those two shades because they are absolutely stunning. So the next prompt is show a palette that is not worth the hype, and again this was quite difficult for me to choose because the palettes that I don't really like I have ended up decluttering, but the palette that I chose is the Urban Decay Ultimate Naked palette. This is not that hyped anymore, but when it first came out I feel like this was very hyped and I wanted it so bad, but I haven't really reached for this at all, to be honest. I obviously have pan in one shade, but that is simply because of my Pandos eyeshadows, because I wouldn't really have reached for this palette that much anyway. And I feel like it's a good palette to have, but I would never reach for this really on its own unless I wanted to create like a really soft kind of matte look, but I have other palettes for that, or I can just reach for any other palette and just use the mattes, not the shimmers. So for me, who's someone who loves shimmer eyeshadows, this is not really the best eyeshadow palette for me, and if I could go back I probably wouldn't pick it up again. I have thought about decluttering this palette, but I still have a few shades here that I don't really have in other palettes, and because of that reason I am keeping it. But yeah, I think this is something that I could potentially declutter in the future, but at the same time it's just a kind of good palette to have. So next question is show your favorite palette from a favorite brand, and I would say that my favorite brand is probably Colourpop. I would say probably Colourpop or Anastasia, but I decided to go with Colourpop, and the eyeshadow palette that I chose is the Through My Eyes palette. I feel like this is definitely underrated. It's not really like a lot of people talking about this palette, but I absolutely love this palette. I started using this due to me getting a few shades of this in my Pandos eyeshadows, which is also why I have quite a lot of pan in this palette. And I also kind of decided to work on one shade on my own, but I just absolutely adore this palette. It's just such a beautiful, stunning palette, and I can create such nice looks with this. I feel like it's a good mix between cool tones and warm tones, and it has like some jewel tones, some pop and colors, and it's just an all-around amazing palette. And I definitely recommend you to pick this up if you haven't. It is still available on Colourpop's website, I think, and I just absolutely think this is stunning. I don't really have much else to say. It's more one that I probably reach for more in like fall and winter time, but it still has some of those bright colors that I can use in spring, and it's just absolutely amazing. I love this palette so much. Then the final question is show your most used palette, and again this is one that was quite hard for me to pick, but I decided to choose one palette that is kind of just most used due to the project that it's in, and that is my Panda palette this year. So I was thinking about picking the Urban Decay Naked palette because I have used it quite a lot, but I don't really have like that much visible progress on it. And then I thought about picking this because I have used this a lot in the last year, and I also have a lot of pans in this palette, but at the end of the day I decided to go with this palette because it's probably the palette that is most used up. I will not show you where I am currently because I am working on this, like I said, as my Panda palette. So if you want to check that out, just go and look at my playlist. I will update you on that in about a week's time, so you will see what it's currently looking like then. But yeah, this is just my most used palette. Actually the packaging broke as well just after filming my last update, so that is a shame, but it's one palette that I'm just working on currently, and that is why it's the most used in my collection. So that, you guys, was all for this video. It took quite a while to film, and I hope that this video isn't too long, but I really enjoyed sharing with you some of my favorite palettes. I also have made a complete eyeshadow palette collection, and I will have them linked down below if you want to check those out as well. But otherwise, I hope you're having an amazing day, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye guys!